Thanks, Ravi. So, good morning, everyone, and thanks to Jobs for inviting me here, and good morning to my fellow panelists. So, I echo everything, Ravi, you started with the global issue we're dealing with, and Preeti and Sayan, your inputs. I'll take a very personal, I'll share a very personal experience which I went through midway through COVID. So, I lead the learning and development team at CGI, so 60% of the team is women. So exactly midway through COVID, there was a point of time for a couple of weeks where half of my team, especially the women team members, somebody in their family got affected by COVID. It was a very unique situation which I never faced because one of my team members was stuck. She was in lockdown with her son, 3-year-old son, and husband was stuck in a different state. So I couldn't even imagine how she was coping to live in lockdown. Another team member who recently got married, her in-laws were tested COVID positive. Another woman team member, her mother and brother got tested COVID positive. So it kind of opened up me to this huge psychological world where even in a call to check with them, how are you doing and how's the work going, it's so difficult to, you don't know where to draw the boundaries, right? And being a HR and learning leader, if you go through it, imagine how a regular manager, could be men or women, doesn't matter, it's a new world, it's a brave new world where we never stepped before. So those couple of weeks were actually, if you ask me, the highlights for me for the whole year, because that kind of started this journey of how can we make this better for everyone. And fast forward many weeks, 2 months, then what we did was we actually launched the inclusion survey across the organization to understand how all of our members are doing, feeling, and we got some results which we could talk later. But for me, that was a turnkey event in the whole of 2020.
Anil, my next question to you, something like I spoke about the buzzword, for psychological safety, there was another buzzword that made the world come to standstill, which was the entire aspect of the Black Lives Matter. And we all know that, while BLM in itself was a big piece of work that we all need to work on, but we also need to acknowledge that these challenges, especially for women of color, who are more likely to work in jobs that pay less, they have fewer benefits, and less access to affordable childcare, in addition to navigating the combined effects of racial, ethnic, and gender biases. And CGI played its part and stood by this cause. Could you share some of the specifics of what were some of the key initiatives in this aspect?
Thank you. Thanks a lot. I think that's a great question. Before I respond, it was really happy to see the best practices from Preeti and Sayan, and no doubt the slides Neha presented in the beginning shows enterprises doing a lot more. I think it's commitment from organizations like all of us. I was really happy to see those. So CGI is we started by a founder 42 years ago in a garage in Canada, and now it's a global company with 75,000 employees doing business in over 40 countries. So diversity and inclusion cannot be an afterthought. In fact, just like how Sayan was mentioning, respect is actually one of our core values. And very interestingly, last year we were. It's interesting how respect comes out even when you don't look for it. So last year we ran in APAC a 360 feedback survey for all of our managers, and the 360 feedback covered a lot of competencies and also core values. And to our delight, absolute delight, the one factor which got the highest score on 360 for everyone was respect, more than competence anything. So in CGI, respect is actually like second nature, because diversity, equity, and inclusion is what makes our business work. So then we entered the year 2020, which has been a black swan in so many different ways, and the whole Black Lives Matter happened, and then CGI's response was multifold. One is, we're a Canadian organization, so we work closely with Business Council of Canada to actually drive the narrative across Canada and other countries to say this is really important for us, racial inclusion, and Sayan, you were mentioning a while back. Then we said we need to get the message to our members and also make them feel heard, because there's a lot of passive anger and uncertainty in members. So we did an initiative called, sounds very simple, but listening sessions. We just went and listened to our members. And the way we did it was we paid up our leaders, one woman leader and one male leader, and together they would go and do this listening sessions, and we did that globally. It became kind of a mandate for all of our leaders to do, just to hear people out of how they're feeling, and based on that feedback, other actions would emerge. But I think just the mere fact that our leaders are committed to doing it, rather than just doing a focus group from the HR community or bringing a third party to do it, I think it was a very strategic, very living by our core values. I think that made a lot of difference. And by the time these listening sessions came to this part of the world where racial inclusion is not the number one theme, but something else, right? Gender is a big one. So we use the same theme of listening sessions, but kind of change the flavor in APAC, in India, to kind of again run those listening sessions to get a lot of feedback. And that happened together at the same time when we were running the inclusion survey in this part of the world. So which gave us a lot of interesting insights, and later if we have time, we can cite some of those. Also, the other thing we did, which was very interesting, we kind of started off on this whole wellness thing even before COVID happened, but in COVID, wellness became number one priority, as Preeti was mentioning. I remember it very vividly. There was a client visit just before pandemic. We're an IT company, so a lot of clients keep visiting us. A very big telecom client, very senior leaders, and I'm in the room with them in India to kind of present how learning and capability building is helping them. And after we make the presentation, suddenly the client leader turns to us and says, "Please tell us, what are you doing for wellness of your members, because that's a number one priority for us." It was very interesting. Now, not just us from within, but our clients are actually asking, because they also wanted to mirror what we're doing, and also they want us to mirror what they're doing. So now wellness is becoming a business strategy. That was, and I vividly remember that incident. And fast forward a couple of months, in CGI we rolled out an initiative called, we identified few leaders and managers who were interested in this initiative, and they were certified as mental health ambassadors. So we had over many leaders who were, it's a self-nomination, they volunteered themselves, then they are trained to be mental health ambassadors. So obviously, mental health is a science, so you cannot, not everybody can do it, but you could actually be an observer. You could actually spot the signs in people, the way they talk, the way they don't talk, what they're including, what they're not including, to kind of spot if there are any signs of mental health. So these mental health ambassadors became very important part of our strategy. And fast forward, then we realized, at least in this part of the world, there's a bit of stigma, and I think Preeti, you're talking about Sayan, that we don't openly talk about mental health in this part of the world. So we fast forward a couple of months, we actually did a campaign called #It'sMe, where a couple of our senior leaders actually stepped out and did small video logs of their own journey with mental health and how they coped with it, and kind of openly shared it, and that kind of opened up the whole thing. So that was another initiative we did. And the third perspective I want to share, which has been a huge learning for me, and I'm sure it's for all of us, COVID has actually pushed us to look at this entire talent ecosystem in a very integrated way. Right from, earlier administration does their stuff, real estate does their stuff, HR does their stuff, OD does their stuff, wellness does their stuff. First time we were all forced to kind of look at everything end to end together. Interestingly, what we found was one of the best outlets for people to feel inclusive in lockdown, in COVID, was CSR. Very interestingly, thousands of our members in India and APAC contributed to thousands of hours of CSR work together, right from distributing PPP kits to going and teaching kids, doing STEM sessions on Zoom for school kids or even kids of our own colleagues. That kind of brought us together in a very interesting way. Earlier CSR was always a physical activity. Now it's a virtual activity, but we brought people together. And my biggest lesson has been, look at the talent ecosystem end to end. And definition of engagement, as we see employee engagement, has completely flipped 360 degrees after going through these experiences.
Yeah, I have to agree. You know, CSR in hindsight, if you look at it, I think if there, I mean, we don't have any data here right now and not the right forum, but I think if we were to look at it, I'm pretty sure that CSR and overall purpose and fulfillment were some of the things that people stood by last year. Let's address the elephant in the room here that we're talking about gender equity a lot, and we have two men here, right? And there might be questions around where why do we have men involved? But the truth is that conversation around gender equality cannot be covered completely unless we involve men, right? So, Sayan and Anil, both of you, I would like to hear from you. What do you think is the role that men play in this entire journey of equality that we are standing for, and what do you think men can do as allies, as leaders, and also as the beneficiaries?
Sayan, thanks a lot for going first. It always helps for somebody to gather the thoughts when someone else is speaking. So, I had my mentor, one of my early career mentors, Priscilla Nelson, a huge proponent of coaching and mentoring, and she had a huge influence on me. She's in United States. So back in the day when we were working in one organization, we used to do this annual conference during IWD, like how we all do inside the organization. And the conference was called For Women Leaders Only. And then she came in and she asked a very pertinent question, just like Surovi you did, saying, um, you know, if just women leaders come together and talk, then the problem is actually outside the room, not inside the room. You have to talk to the people who are causing the problem, right, on a lighter tone. So next year, second year, when we ran the workshop, we called it Not for Women Leaders Only. And many years fast forward, in one of the organizations I was working as a women leadership development program, and I was new in the organization. So I went in at the end of the session to say hi to the participants. So all participants were women, obviously, but the facilitator was also a lady. There's nothing wrong with that. But then it reminded me of that thought and said, you know, it's great that we're doing this training, but you have to have a conversation with the other gender because they're actually the problem. So I said, I'm here, let's talk to them. But that's important. If I take a personal, like how Sayan you shared, so my wife works for an IT organization, works at the same level in leadership role as me. And then, as I think initially Neha, one of you taking how unpaid hours, 312 hours women do and men do. I'm guilty of that too to some extent. So, and even if you take it a little more personal, even the domestic support we have at home, it's very, it's important to cite, and it's completely whole different conversation of how COVID impacted women at all levels of economy, structured and unstructured. The domestic support at our home. Her husband could not work because of COVID. He drives an auto rickshaw, so she became the single, income earner for the family. But she would spend 8 hours of her time with me and my family. And just imagining how she was coping with the whole thing, it kind of opens up so many conversations at so many different levels. But I think therefore it's important to have men as allies at every stage. Coming back to CGI, we started off on this journey of having men as allies, and if you actually, when we were all of us were having a conversation before, I was saying if you actually put it together, men as allies as an abbreviation, it's MA in Hindi, right? MA. It's another turn. It's very dear to your heart, right? Mother is very dear to heart. So I think it's important to have those conversations because the way the mix of genders are at workplace, the percentage of men as managers is going to be huge anyway, and there'll be a stage when you will have 50% representation there. So as long as there are more managers and leaders where men are playing the roles, it's very important to have that conversation going. So from CGI, we're committed to continue actually accelerate this whole conversation around men as allies. And as I mentioned, we ran an inclusion survey where we've got some very good news and some areas where we would like to focus more on, where we'd like investing our time and effort to take this forward.